Right. Not on. It's not on. Can we turn it on?
Oh.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, questions? Yep, microphone here.
One second. Find the mic.
Oh, I've got to find the mic. Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Okay. No mic. Well, ask the question, I'll repeat it. Ask the question, I'll repeat it.
Oh, it's here.
All right. All right. Okay. Talk to me.
Okay. Thank you very much for your teachings. First
Okay.
of all, you were saying earlier about your friend who was in prison for 17 years that she managed
Well, a
to...
woman I read about. I
A
didn't know
woman,
her.
yes.
Yes.
She managed to change her mind, but she didn't give up on the idea
Yes.
of being free.
That's right.
How do you balance
That's the point.
the passion, the need
No, that's
to
exactly.
be
That's
free?
it's a really good question. In other words, that assumes. See, that's our point. That assumes for us. We assume that you need anger to force you to act. So if we think you don't have anger, you become weak, and I think that's the misconception. Do you understand the point? Can you hear my words?
Yeah.
And that's where I think, because in our view of the mind, like I said before, we give equal status to anger, attachment, jealousy, anxiety, etc., along with love, compassion, wisdom and clarity and passion and confidence and action. But that's not the Buddhist view, and that's why it needs thinking about. So, and that's where we mistake compassion. I remember one time the Dalai Lama was asked by an interviewer, he said, the interviewer said, you need anger to act. Look at action. And the Dalai Lama said, I know what you mean, but it's mainly anger. And when we understand anger, anger means fury, freaked out, ego-based, panic, no clarity, but lots of wild energy. He said, the Dalai Lama said, if it's only anger that motivates you, you won't give up because anger collapses. But he says when it's compassion, without anger, that's action. That's what Martin Luther King. It's good to be angry. He said it's good to find fault. My God, look at the racism, look at the suffering. But then you say, what can I do to help? That really is compassion. So I can see even myself when I was politically active, I also had compassion. But I didn't understand to have compassion without anger. Whereas if you remove the anger, and I can see with my personality, clearly I'm a very volatile kind of person, right? So I can see that I'm much less angry than I was 40 years ago. But I look similar. But the fact is I can see in myself, anger is frustration, you kind of go crazy, you lose your common sense, you hate the person, you want to harm. Whereas compassion and action is, that's terrible and I must help. That's compassion. So we have to cultivate, keep the action part, but throw out the frustration and the crazy part. Do you understand? But our problem is we either think I've got to be action and angry, or we just become passive. But that's the point. And that's why I think the Dalai Lama is a good example. I mean, people know the Dalai Lama, and we think, oh yeah, he's a Buddhist, he's holy, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, 60 years since his country was, since the Tibetans were thrown out of their countries by the Chinese communists. Since 60 years since his country is completely destroyed, you know. So he's powerful, he's charismatic, and he has never stopped for 60 years, politically, diplomatically, socially, spiritually, trying to change Tibet. But he's not angry. He cracks jokes about Mao Zedong. He laughs, he's funny, he's compassionate, but he's not angry. And that's the point with this particular Buddhist model, really learning to distinguish the difference. Whereas we tend to think we mistake them, you understand? So it's a very interesting way of seeing it. So I can see myself many mistakes. When people start to become a Buddhist, you think, I've got to give up being angry, I've got to become mindful. So you walk around like some idiot, looking like, you know, oh, I don't care. That's passivity, that's nihilism, that's terrible, you know. Do you understand? Yes. So it's really learning to distinguish the key factor in the Buddhist view, the key characteristic of all the neurotic states of mind is that you lose all common sense. you know, they're extreme, they're distorted, and they're completely eye-based. And there's no sense of connectedness. But when you have powerful qualities of compassion and wisdom, and you have also courage, action, and you're connected to others, and it's not disturbed. The key factor also of the negative states is they're very disturbing. You understand? But when you can be strong, you can be active, and you can have compassion, but you don't lose your common sense. And that's very interesting to look at this in ourselves, you know. Do you understand? So often, you know, for example, when we think of a patient person, we think they're very passive. But no, patient means you don't go crazy when something goes wrong. You're able to handle it. So it shows a very courageous mind. But easily patients can become passivity. Oh, I don't care, you give up, you know. So it's quite subtle, but the difference is very big. Do you understand? I mean, yeah. Go.
So I said the question, I asked for the advice just before the lunch.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if I can get an answer.
Yeah, I forget, say what it was.
Yeah, you said before that you had your experiences while you were younger as a hippie. About these things, working with...
Oh, the
those
drugs and
medicines,
everything. Yeah, I understand. Okay. Okay, well, I mean, we can see that the body and the mind, if we take the body and our feelings and the mind are very connected, right? So if the weather is very hot, you can get a temperature and you hallucinate, isn't it? So clearly, even just the weather can affect your mind. I mean, if the body is changing a lot, do you understand my point? So the body is a certain way, it impacts upon the mind. So when the mind is a certain way, that impacts upon the body. I mean, we can see they're intimately connected. So it's clear things like, you know, hallucinatory drugs can really, they naturally activate different aspects of your mind. That's clear, isn't it? But the Buddhist point is, and that can be very helpful. I mean, I remember I learned a lot about my mind, and I learned a lot about the world when I had drugs. But the Buddhist point is, that's still the very gross level of your mind. We have the capacity to access these more subtle levels of mind where you can have much more powerful clarity, much more powerful insight, much more powerful positive states of mind. So in the end, from the Buddhist point of view, you can learn something, but it only goes so far because it's still only affecting you at the sensory level. And the Buddhist view is we can go way beyond the sensory level, and that's where all this technique in meditation called single-pointed concentration, where you can access more subtle levels of mind. So some of the qualities, I mean, this is the technique that the Hindus invented more than 3,000 years ago. It's a very skillful psychological technique that enables you to completely subdue the crazy chat, as well as go beyond the senses. So we don't posit such a level of consciousness in our ordinary modern science, you know, because when you have drugs, that's still physical, isn't it? It's still affecting your sensory consciousness. And that's fine, but the Buddhist view is you can access much more subtle levels of your mind, where even if you had those temporarily, and it's not the end result, it's not the main goal, but we have these much more powerful levels for capacity for clarity, for bliss, for wisdom, many other, but when the grosser level is more subdued. So the longer term in the Buddhist one, it can be useful to learn about things, utilizing things like drugs, but it only goes so far, is the main point. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Good, okay. Yes, the next thing. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, like, mind possessors, like you referred...
That's the term, the Tibetan term, literally, for the word we say in English, sentient beings. Animals, humans, and other beings that the Buddha would assert exist.
So are plants included in this? And if
the
not,
Buddhist view would be a plant is not a sentient being. It's, go on.
And how do you differentiate between them?
Okay.
Like, what's the
I understand.
criteria?
It's not, okay. Experientially, you don't know, you can't tell directly. And okay. We can deduce that you and I are sentient beings because we're making noises out of our mouth that we call concepts, you know, and the body isn't rotting. So we can deduce there's a mind there using the Buddhist model. So when you're a dead body, you're the four elements only. Mind has left your body. Your mind is not there. So you're merely only the four elements. So first of all, we can deduce that you have a mind, and we can deduce that I have a mind, but we can't see directly because the mind is not physical. So the Buddha would say, as you progress in this practice, using this skillful technique that I just mentioned. The world knows it as mindfulness, but actually it's a much more sophisticated skill, like I said, invented by the Indians thousands of years ago, that's called literally single-pointed concentration. And through this skill, you access, as I'm saying, these more subtle levels of cognition that is not evident to our eyes. So when you're at that level, because you've gone beyond the sensory and beyond the conceptual, and if you were to see a person who'd fully accomplished this skill, and this is a skill that people right now are accomplishing, it's been several thousand years. When you've learned to access this more subtle level of your mind, you would look like you were dead, because you've gone beyond the grosser level, beyond the sensory and beyond the conceptual. Your brain is not involved. And that's why, of course, if we take neuroscience, if we take the brain as the mind, this sounds just like cosmic nonsense. But this is the Buddha's view, and that's anyone, it can take several years and you can learn to access this level of your mind, get concentration. So then one of the characteristics of your mind at that level is that you have what they call clairvoyance. This is something that's pretty hippie and cosmic in our modern psychology. There's no understanding of it, but this is completely fitting with the Buddha's view. So our mind cognizes, so our eye consciousness cognizes something, ear consciousness cognizes, our conceptuality cognizes, and when you're at this subtler level, you're beyond the conceptual and beyond the sensory, then your mind has a more powerful capacity to cognize phenomena the gross mind can't, and it's only then that you will see what a mind possessor is. You will be able to cognize directly that a plant does not have a consciousness, but a microphone does not have a consciousness, but a person has a consciousness. Or even there are certain beings who don't have gross physical bodies, like spirits, who have a consciousness. So you'll be able to see that with this more subtle level of your mind. So initially you can't prove it. Are you seeing my point now? Or not? Or I said too many things?
Yeah. So
You get the point.
basically we somehow...
What?
Someone achieved this and somehow shared the knowledge with us.
This noise this microphone makes is overwhelming your voice. I can't hear.
Sorry.
Go on.
So basically, like
I think speaking to the top of it like that.
basically, someone achieved this state maybe and
Concentration, yeah.
shared with us this knowledge.
Oh, it's all there. It's been going for thousands of years. It's all been shared by all the teachings. Everything I'm telling you now, and I'm going to be telling you soon about the concept of karma, reincarnation, past lives, it's all coming from the direct experience of the people who've seen it. But if you don't posit the possibility of the mind to have this capacity, then you'll just think it's superstition, which is what scientists think about it, you know? Do you understand my point? Because if you only posit the brain, when you hear the Buddha's view of what's possible, it just sounds like religion, and you have to believe it, and you can't prove it. But the Buddha's view is it's the potential of every mind. So all the information I'm about to tell you about karma is coming from the direct experience of those who've seen it. And you have to take that as your hypothesis. You don't have to believe it. You understand my point?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Who else, people? Yes. Pass the mic over there, please. Yes.
In regards to a mentally ill or depressed person, the Western psychological point of view is that the person has probably been traumatized in early childhood,
That's right.
something like that.
Exactly.
From the Buddhist point of view,
Yes.
is it that he or she has done some harm in past lives?
I understand. So first of all, again, what goes on in our mind, first of all, the first thing is to think of them as a bunch of habits. They're tendencies, and indeed we get born with those tendencies. Now we're going to discuss that in a minute. This is just the Buddhist model. So whether you have the tendency to kill, or lie, or steal, or be compassionate, or wise, or depressed, or angry, they're all tendencies in your mind that the Buddhist view would say you come programmed with at the first second of conception from having had those tendencies before. That's the fundamental principle, okay? Now, the external world is true. Things do happen to us. So if a person like me, let's say, I didn't have a tendency to get depressed because I expressed my anger externally. So when I didn't get what I wanted, if my father was mean to me or my mother was mean to me, for example, then I would express it with anger. Another person, because their tendency would be to get depressed, something happened to them then and they got depressed. So the Buddha doesn't argue with that, but the crucial difference is, the Buddha would say the depression and the anger or whatever, are tendencies in my mind, and that external event then triggers it. But what if I'm born in this life with no anger and no depression, because I come into this life as a result of past spiritual practice, and I've cleaned up my mind, then I won't get angry, and I won't get depressed when something traumatic happens. It won't be a trauma for me. It depends on what's in your mind. Whereas the Western view says the person is there, trauma happens, and so depression is a result. The Buddha would say the person is there, they've got a tendency for depression, that event occurs, and it catalyzes what's in their mind already. That's the difference. Can you see my point?
Yeah, so that tendency is not as a punishment for past life, it's
Well,
not
no,
related to karma?
Of course, everything's related to karma, which I'm about to present to you in a minute. Everything is related to karma. It's the natural law that runs the universe. I will describe that in a minute, and that'll answer the point you're asking.
Thank you.
Yeah? What else do you want? Nothing. Yes,
You
go
talked
down.
about before about the victim complex.
Well, that's just my term for having, the Buddha calls it ego grasping. Go on.
Yeah, and victim, and you detailed this victim
Yes.
mentality. I would like to hear more about the savior complex or savior.
What's that one?
Savior.
What's that one?
complex. The one who we are trying to be of benefit to others, but actually we are going into the trap of forcing the others to help
Oh,
or
okay. Yeah,
not
that's,
being at the right place.
oh, that's clear. No, that's very clear. That's the Buddhist, as I already indicated before. When, let's say, you've got strong attachment, we've all got strong attachment. Buddha says if you're an ordinary person, you have attachment. If you've done the inner work and you've got rid of attachment, you're not an ordinary person. You're pretty an advanced person, and we can accomplish that. So given that most of us have this attachment, which is this drive within us naturally to want the nice things, to manipulate to get the nice things, and then to get upset when we don't get them. Basically speaking, are you with me here? And that's attachment and aversion. So that it can manifest in many ways. You know, you might be attached to getting boys, you might be attached to getting food, you might be attached to always hearing good music. I mean, there's many more things than that. We've all got our own style, but we're all driven by this craving to have nice things and to avoid having ugly things. Pretty fundamental. Okay, so like a second point, like I said, oh, no, I forgot. What did you say again? I forget, I was off on another track. What happened? What did you ask? Just remind me, I'm sorry, I forgot.
It is about this complex.
Okay, thank you.
of
Okay,
trying
got
to-
it. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay, so let's say, look at a common way that attachment will work with some people. If, let's say, a person hasn't got much anger, they don't get angry when things go wrong. That person, you know, another person doesn't get much anger. They're very kind. They're very compassionate. So that kind of person still has attachment. So if that attachment is polluting their compassion, they'll run around trying to make the world a better place, driven by their compassion, definitely, but it's polluted by their attachment, which causes them to manipulate and control things, because it's the attachment that's the problem. Being compassionate, you can never complain. But a person who's that kind wants to make things better, but their attachment makes them neurotic and manipulative and controlling. Are you seeing my point? Not everybody who's got attachment wants to change things. Some people have got so much attachment, they don't care. The world can do what it likes. You just get what you want and you're selfish. But other people also have some compassion and want to make things better. So when compassion is mixed with attachment, it's a mess, you know. Are you seeing what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's exactly the point. That's the good girl. You're the
We can
good
make
girl.
this distinction by meditation. We can make the distinction between attachment and compassion. I need to be
Okay.
in the right to have the right action.
No, I understand exactly. This technique, okay, so what's meditation and what's its function? There are two main kinds of meditation in Buddhism, thousands of techniques, but the one that's generally considered to be the word meditation is what vaguely the world knows as mindfulness, which is cultivated. But really it's this skill that I'm describing, invented by these Indians thousands of years ago, that's technically a psychological skill, and it's called developing single-pointed concentration. So what it is, again, like I said before, is this technique where you train the mind to go beyond the gross conceptuality, to be beyond the berserk, uncontrolled thoughts. Eventually, when you're really advanced at it, you go beyond the sensory, and you literally go to a subtler level of your mind. If you can imagine that, try to hear the words. So even if you begin to slightly practice that, one of the key things you're doing is you're getting out of your head. So we'll do this in a minute, just to give an example. So this skill is it's not a magical technique that makes it easier to see your mind. It's not as if all it is learning to train the mind to focus. So when you can learn to focus your mind, and then you want to look at your mind, you can learn to focus on anything. You can focus on learning how to play the piano better. You can learn to get concentration to make you a better footballer. You can learn to have concentration to become a better cyclist. But here you use the skill to concentrate in your daily life to learn to understand what's going on in your mind. That's what you learn to pay attention to. And I don't mean in meditation as well, I mean in your daily life. So if every morning for even 5 minutes you practice, and I'll do this technique in a minute, you practice this simple technique where you train to focus on something, and typically the first thing the Buddha taught, which you could focus on, is the breath. You know, the sensation at your nose. You just simply anchor your mind to that. There's nothing religious about it. It's a practical skill. You focus, you decide you're going to concentrate. So naturally, you don't concentrate. The mind is all over the place. So you have to train it. It takes a great effort and discipline to develop some concentration where you can stay on the object without being distracted. So that's a real skill that you can learn. So when you practice that every day, and then on top of that, you need to have the wish to know what is happening in your mind. You get my point? Learning to concentrate on your breath doesn't mean you learn to know your mind. You have to consciously want to use that skill in your daily life. So in other words, in my relationship with the boyfriend, normally I wake up in the morning, I feel all stressed, I know I'm worried, work is coming, the traffic will be bad, he's annoying me, the kids are making me crazy. You're noticing all the things outside, right? You're observing the traffic, you're watching him, you're doing the breakfast. You know you're feeling strange, but you don't know how to pay attention to it. You've never learned that. So what happens is when I'm driving the car, it's all the tension's been building up, I haven't been paying attention to it, and then when the car jumps in front of me, I want to kill the guy. That's typical, right? Because we don't pay attention. So all you're trying to do here, the Buddhist approach, you can learn this skill for starting in the beginning of the day. Start it for a few minutes, even in the beginning of the day. It's not magic. It takes time to really develop the skill. It takes years, in fact. But you can start somewhere. So already from even practicing watching your breath for a few minutes, then in your daily life, and you have to want to do this, you've developed the ability to focus. So now you're going to be learning to use that ability to focus, not just to focus on the boyfriend, not just to focus on the traffic, but you're learning to focus internally. As you're doing things, you're noticing the thoughts coming, you're noticing what's going on, and you get better and better and better at that. So this concentration meditation is simply a skill, a tool that you use, but the real one is wanting to know your mind. Now you can do that without doing meditation. I mean, every day we know what we're thinking to some degree. Every day we talk ourselves through things. Every day we tell ourselves to shut up or be careful, don't say those words, Robina, don't upset the person. We're doing it all the time, but we learn to do this better and better and better and better and better. Are you with me? Are you with me? So this concentration meditation is just a means to an end. It brings great benefits in itself, but it's just the means to an end. You're training your mind to be skillful and focused, and then but the real one is you have to want, as Lama Yeshe puts it, we've got to want to be your own therapist. He says this job is like learning to be your own therapist. You know, seeing your mind, hearing the stories, hearing the anger, hearing the hurt, hearing the depression, hearing the resentment, and sort of arguing with yourself, talking yourself through it. It's not cosmic. It's not at all mystical. It's very practical, but you have to want to do that instead of in the mind all the stories about he this and he that and the traffic this and how dare you do that. You're changing the dialogue in your mind. That's the real job, and you get more sophisticated at that. That means as you get more concentration, you go ever more deeply, and you hear the conceptual stories ever more subtly, ever more deep, ever more deep. Not back, but down into your mind, if that makes sense. Do you hear that? Yeah. But the real part of this is the wish, the will, the wish to know your mind, the wish to hear your thoughts, the wish to own what's in there. And that's the part that's the hardest one, because we're instinctively addicted to pointing to the outside all the time and then justifying what I feel. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this needs integrity, and it needs clarity, because he might be a creep, he might be doing wrong things, and it's in common sense. Instead of only saying it's all my mind, it's not all your mind at all. He is playing a role in it, but it's learning to have more power and more ability to make decisions, like I said before, about your choices, about your life, knowing what you can and can't handle, knowing what's the best thing to do. You become more kind of grown up, is the way I'd put it. Again, Buddha doesn't own this, and I'm just saying it in my own very casual way. I mean, this is common sense. We all understand it to some degree. But Buddha, I would say, is an expert at our ability to do this and at the skills that enable us to do this job. You with me? Okay. Yeah.
Microphone?
I have a question.
Yeah. Right.
There are some practical applications like the logic or like of the bubble exercise to deal with the three root poison.
Yeah.
Can we hear about?
So what was the first? I missed the first part of your sentence.
If there are some very short meditations or focusing about, like the bubble exercise.
The who?
Bubble.
Bubble? I don't know that.
You see a bubble in the moment just before explode.
I don't know that one.
Lojong.
Yeah, Lojong, that's different. But the one you just said, I don't know. So, okay, there's different. Okay, the general job that we're trying to do, if you say you're a Buddhist, from here all the way to enlightenment. Where are you? Oh, there you are. The job we're trying to do, all the way from here to the end result that Buddha says we can accomplish, it never changes. It's you becoming ever more familiar, ever more subtly familiar with your mind and distinguishing between the neuroses and the valid stuff. That's the essential job all the way from here to enlightenment. So basically it all is a cognitive process, even in the day-to-day level, where you're learning to hear ever more clearly the conceptual stories and identify the neurotic ones from the valid ones and basically reconfiguring those conceptual stories. It really is that. So Lojong is, we'll go into that later, is just one of those more powerful, more advanced approaches of developing compassion. You with me? That's the answer. So yes is the answer. Okay. Okay. There are quite a few more questions I wanted to go. Okay. A couple more questions. Yeah. I know there were more no more. We'll continue later. But I want to go into these. Yeah. Go. Over here. Please come back. Mike. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
How do we navigate between expressing our emotions, observing our emotions, and the release of energies from these emotions and the patterns that we...
I understand. See, already the words you use are implying already the wheels have fallen off. You wouldn't have to release anything if already you've dealt with it before it comes to the level of being released. That's the long-term goal. To deal with it at the conceptual level before it gets to the level of emotion. Then you don't have to release anything, then you're okay. So that's going to take time. So you just have to, it's like learning to, it depends on how skilled you are. You know, if you say, I've discovered my wheels are falling off, I'm going 150 kilometers an hour, what will I do? The answer to what you'll do depends on how much driving skill you have, right? You with me? So if you've never done any driving before, there's not much you can do. But if you're a really good driver, you can give lots of advice. So exactly the same here. If you've looked at your mind a lot and really got lots of practice under your belt, then depending on where you're at and what skills you've got, you can do many things. But you have to have those skills first. But to expect to have a skill when you've never done anything before and you're waiting for and your wheels are falling off, almost there's nothing you can do. Just hope you don't kill somebody. And then you learn from it and go back to basics and then try to want to see your mind before you have to express everything. But the other point is this. In our world, we have two options. One is to vomit it out, as you said, express your emotions, or deny. And that's where, that's the kind of person who gets depressed. And you can't get out of bed one morning. And the other person is one who vomits everything out their mouth. But there's a third option here, this is the point that I'm talking about. Becoming familiar with the thought processes, the thoughts, before they become emotional. That's the point. That's the real skill. That's what we're aiming for. You with me? So then you'll know well. So another answer to it, how do you know what to express and what not, really, isn't it? There's almost a simple answer, but I'll have to, I'll explain it more. But basically we take these two wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. So the wisdom wing is really what we're discussing right here. Learning to know your own mind, learning to control your own body, learning to control your own speech, so you can become this marvelous person. You can kind of develop this extraordinary person of clarity and wisdom and equanimity and compassion and wisdom and all the rest. So you can become this great person. That's the wisdom wing. Then you've got the compassion wing, which is to help others. So if you want to ask, how do you know when to express something? Well, it's either for your sake. So the wisdom wing is for your sake. It's really the work you do for yourself. So if you want to, if you're with a friend whom you trust, You can afford to express what you feel because you know you trust them, and they will help you work out what you're feeling. That's one reason to express something, but you've got to have the person in front of you who wants to have it. You don't pick a stranger on the street and start expressing your emotions. They're not interested. You with me? So you select whom you express to, and that will be to help you sort it out. The other one is, the reason to express something is it for the sake of the other person. Are you hearing me? There's only two options. Okay, that takes time though to get that clear, you understand? And of course what you're going to express to another is not your emotions, that's going to be for their sake. So let's just say, you know, I'm working on my mind and he's just left me, and I'm really having a struggle in my mind. You're my friend from 10 years ago, I haven't seen you for 10 years. And you say, hi Robina, how are you? I'm not going to start vomiting out all my junk on top of you, because that's what we do now. Someone asks a question and out it all comes, you know. So I'm going to be very wise. I'll realise you don't want to hear all my rubbish. I'll say, I'm really well, how are you? And you won't even know I'm having a problem. But if you're my dearest friend, whom I trust, I might burst into tears and get a hug and start crying to you, because it's appropriate. So we've got to know the person in front of us. Do you understand my point? But we're mostly so self-centered, we don't know what's going on in our own mind, so we feel this right to express whatever we feel, wherever we feel it, whenever we feel it. I mean, that's just plain foolishness, like a child, you know? You've got to be wise. You understand my point? Yeah. And the fact is, if you're really working on your own mind, really dealing with the stuff before the wheels fall off, eventually you won't need to have to so-called vomit it out or express it or release it. It's only if it's tension and build up you have to release something. And that's, again, why we have to release, because we only notice when the wheels are falling off. That's my point continuously. You get my point? But this takes time, you know? Of course it does. A couple more questions, then we'll go into other things. Yeah, go. One more. That'll do for now. Yes, honey.
My question is how you change your tendency. For example, how you can change the tendency of fury or anger.
Yeah, exactly, darling. Again, you don't wait till the wheels fall off. It's too late then. But you learn. This is where, and this does sound abstract to us, but this is the model. This is psychological. This is the view in Buddhism. Like I'm saying. But if it's anger, let's say, strong habit to explode when you don't get what attachment was, let's just say. So that's the habit very strongly of expressing what's in the mind in a volatile way. Okay, I understand that one. So that's why the first step in real practice is to decide, at least I won't vomit it out.
I have done this.
Okay, so well done. That's the first step. That has to be the first step.
At the point in I just know my feeling inside when I'm angry, and I don't act.
Good. So then?
But I feel angry.
Okay. I know, but that's okay. You know, got to go one step at a time, darling. This is the point here. Okay. The first level of, you can, all these teachings I'm giving here, mostly we're talking, you know, there's different levels of these teachings. The way they're packaged in the Tibetan system, they're all Buddhist teachings, but they're packaged a certain way. And the very first level of teaching is like sort of junior school, and that's where mainly you're focusing on good ethics, not killing, not stealing, not lying. Again, not because Buddha said, but because you know that's a useful practice for you to give yourself less drama. It's for your sake first. So this is already a pretty powerful level of practice. If you look at us in this room, we mostly don't go around raping and killing people. I don't think so. You wouldn't be in this room if you did. You get my point now? Mostly we just vomit out of our mouth what we feel, or get mad at somebody, or shout at somebody, or curse somebody behind their back, or just rabbit on about nothing. You understand? It was mostly with our speech, you know? So we can see the danger of that. So I mean, I know in my family, for example, there are 7 siblings. My mother had a lot of babies all at once, and very volatile, they're all like me. Except my brother, he's more quiet. He's one boy at the end of 6 girls. So we're all, and we're very close in age, so we're very close, you know, we're all old now. But when we were kids, we'd fight and yell and shout, because there's lots of dramas in the family. Everybody has dramas. And then we got older, we'd leave home, we'd come back at Christmas time, and we'd all fight. Naturally, you know, then we forgive each other. But you know yourselves, words build up. You can't take words back. If you fight with somebody, you can love each other and forgive, but they're resonating in your mind. You can remember those words, and sometimes people never forget them. And eventually, one day, you'll stop talking to each other. This is so common in, for example, families, you know. So it's just the words it's just so powerful, words, and they seem like nothing. I mean, you can get arrested for stealing $5, but you don't get arrested for shouting at somebody or lying, for example. I mean, but words are powerful. So I know in our family, we're all very different, all very volatile, all got different viewpoints, you know. None of them likes Buddhism. We're all brought up Catholics. But the last 20 years, I'd say, there's this unspoken agreement between us. And some of my sisters are the ones who give the example, and we all do it, because we're very close. We do not talk about things we disagree with when we're together, and we do not say bad things about each other to each other, which is very common in families. We even now praise each other, which is very unusual, you know, because you have sibling rivalry. But it's very powerful because there's a real harmony between us now. It's quite extraordinary. And we've got very different viewpoints. I mean, really very different. So just the power of speech is pretty incredible, meaning controlling what you say. And so, you know, we're all old now, and we will not go there. When we're in together, we often meet together, I'm back in Australia, we do not talk about things we disagree with. We're not trying to suppress it. We just know there's no benefit because you're going to fight. What's the point? So we talk about things we've got agreement with, and it's genuine, and it's really harmonious, and we really do love each other. Do you understand? So that's just controlling speech. That's stupendous. Already that's a good start. Now, of course, because we've still got the energy inside us, you know, but then that's okay. Don't be scared of it. We're scared of it. We think we're going to explode, so we have to release it, like you said. But if you're really working on yourself, you at least control your speech. But if you've got a good friend, you can maybe speak it to them. Like, you know, that's how you release it. But again, you've got to choose that person selectively. Don't just vomit on everybody. And then eventually, as you keep working on yourself, and you're being your own therapist, you're talking to yourself. Often we feel what goes on in here isn't valid. We have to talk to someone else all the time. But we become our own therapist. It's not a joke to say this. That as you get better at that, you won't feel the explosion of emotion. You'll be more subdued. You'll be more disciplined. But you're not suppressing it either. We become more grown up. I really, really mean this, you know. That takes time.
Okay, the feeling of anger, it doesn't.
Well, the feeling is just your body.
But you.
Darling, the feeling is your body.
Okay.
Oh, the little sentient thing crawling up me. Listen, it's biting me on the way. What is this? Sorry, I have to investigate. Excuse me. Biting me. Sorry. I'm sure it doesn't. I mean, excuse me. I don't know where it is now. Never mind. I'll feel a bite again. Oh my God. It feels like a bee. Excuse me. Go on. What? What was that? I don't know what's that. Go on. Are you? Oh, are we communicating here or not?
Yes, I understand.
So what's the problem still?
I just don't understand. If,
which bit don't you understand, darling?
If that feeling of anger is
what?
It does disappear, and someday you just don't feel anger.
No, darling, listen, no, it's not like that. That's just thinking, you know, no, you've got to, oh, this is the point. It only changes when you hear what the conceptual, you can hear what anger is saying. So what does anger say? Tell me the thoughts. What is the concept that anger expresses? Say it out to me. Give an example. Say what anger says.
I have a situation in my job, for example.
No, darling, I don't mean that. No, I don't mean that. No, listen to me. Listen. I want to hear the words that anger says. What does anger say? This is the point. Tell me.
I disagree with the action of my colleague.
Good. So you're thinking, how dare he do that? That's what anger's saying, isn't it? He's wrong. He should not have done that. Is that anger? Good. Okay. So you have to argue with that. You should. I mean, for example, what do you mean he shouldn't do it? He's allowed to do what he likes. He's allowed to do what he likes. He's allowed to do what he likes. This sounds very shocking. But you have to decide what you're going to do with it. If you can change it, and you discuss it with him. If not, what choice do you have? This is the point. What choice do you have? What are you going to do about it? Go on. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
This is really sounds almost too simple.
I try to communicate, but
what?
I try to communicate, but
with him.
With my colleague.
To get him to change his mind. To get him to change his mind. So if he doesn't, so what if he doesn't do it? Then you've got to deal with your thoughts in here. And that means you don't just wait for the anger to go away, because it necessarily won't. You'll just build it up and it'll come to another person and then it'll be another situation. You've got to argue with the fundamental assumption. This is the point I'm making. You've got to argue with the fundamental assumption that anger is saying. How dare he do what I don't like, basically. And you might still be right. He might punch me in the nose, and it's wrong to punch a person in the nose. But what if he doesn't change? I have got to make a decision what to think about that punch. Like that woman on death row. When she said they couldn't take my mind from me, I decided I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. Now that's dramatic. She was wrongly accused. She was living in hell, but she changed her interpretation of it. That's the point. That's the point. Are you hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. This is hard because we believe that the angry story is right, and why should I change it? Are you seeing my point?
Yes.
It's like a huge, and the fact is it might be right that he's wrong. It might be right that he punched me. It might be right that the person did those things. But if I can't change it, I've got to learn to reassess my opinion about it. That's what practice is. It's not being foolish, it's not being stupid, it's being intelligent. So that woman could see it was wrong that she was accused of murder. She didn't murder anybody. So she never stopped trying to get her freedom. And because she was more sane and decided she'd make the most of this experience, she probably did yoga, she learned to become peaceful, but she continued to change it. And she was succeeded in the end. But she didn't go crazy. Example of mine too, a simple example, always I tell this one. I've got a friend in Australia. She's, she's old, like my age now. And when she first married and had kids, she discovered her husband was an alcoholic. Well, you don't want an alcoholic husband, right? We want a nice husband who doesn't look alcoholic. So after a while, she naturally hoped he would change. Now, the part of us that wants him to change, compassion for sure, she'd have compassion for him. But her attachment, which is this neurotic part of us that wants him to be the way I want him to be. Do you understand my point? That's polluting it. So she tried to get him to change. He didn't change. So at some point, it's like with the woman on death row, she had to accept the fact that it didn't look like he was changing. So many people in relationships, if I'm really a good girl, I'm a good girl, and he keeps beating me up, and 27 years later, everybody on the planet can see that I'm an idiot sticking around, but I'm trying to be a good, oh, he really does love me, bash. Or he really does love me, you're stupid. That's attachment. That's attachment, because you have a fantasy about the person, and then you become weak and foolish, and you become like a doormat. That's a disaster. That's not kindness at all. So then if you're really seeing your mind, and you can't change the situation. My friend in Australia, she had to make a decision at some point. She had to stop expecting him to be an alcoholic. That's attachment. So she weighed up the options. She weighed up the pros and the cons. So she discovered, she knows he's a really nice guy. I know the man. He's very kind. He's very generous. He doesn't vomit in the soup. He doesn't beat people up. Do you understand what I'm saying? He just quietly gets drunk and goes to sleep. So he doesn't harm anybody. He's generous. He loves her. The children love him. The grandchildren love him. So she weighed it up and decided she would stay. But she changed her mind about it, gave up trying to change him, accepted him for who he is, loved him for who he is, and so now is content and has her own life, goes to her retreats, and does what she does. It's giving up this neurotic, obsessive, it shouldn't be this way, it's wrong that way, he must think this way. Why? The stuff that never stops in our head, never stops in our head. This is advanced stuff, I tell you. But you don't lose your common sense. The woman in prison didn't ever stop trying to get her freedom. That's why the Dalai Lama is a great example. He hasn't stopped for 60 years. But he does it with a happy mind. He's funny and cracks jokes. It sounds cute and easy, but it comes from profound practice. Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
It's practical, but it's so hard. And the real one is to see this obsessiveness. The neurotic states of mind, anger, attachment, anxiety, jealousy, they're kind of obsessive and absurd, and they're like grasping at something and can't let go. Really demented states of mind. But the trouble is we mix them with our good qualities. That must have been that bee. There's a great big fat bite on me. Wow. Did anybody see a bee come out of me? I didn't see it. Wow. Master. It's a great big... Anyway, never mind. Good purification. So let me now talk... I want to talk about now this bigger picture in the Buddhist worldview about karma, which is the weirdest one for our... either the materialist view or the Christian view. It's a very weird view. Okay. All right. So basically, the Buddha's view, this natural law, meaning he didn't make it up, no one's running it, No one runs botany, no one runs numbers, no one runs gravity. It's the way that the conditions of this universe function. This is what Buddha says about karma. A big surprise to us. And the law of karma, a Sanskrit word, it means action, okay? But it's implying the law of cause and effect. So, I mean, we might, as scientists, might not use that concept. But clearly, you know, pottery is a law of cause and effect. Gardening is a law of cause and effect. They're all, that's why we can have 100-story buildings that don't fall down every time, because you learn the laws, you abide by the laws, and you get a building. You abide by the laws, you'll get a rose every time. Okay, other laws might intervene, you know, a thief might come, but basically laws have their own, and once you learn those laws, you can replicate them and get the result every time. That's the Buddha's view completely. So, okay, this law that he's talking about, that he says he's observed with his mind, obviously at a subtle level, is the law that runs the universe, or the universe runs within. So that all minds and lives, all sentient beings, are living within this law. It's like if you say the law of botany runs gardens, or gardens exist within the law of botany, then sentient beings, meaning lives of sentient beings, and being more precise, the happiness and suffering of sentient beings. So given this model that Buddha has of the mind, like we were talking, and he subsumes it down, all these thousands of states of mind, in the neurotic ones come down to these three. So that I mentioned briefly, remember, the object of ignorance in this context is strangers. The object of aversion or anger is called enemies. The object of attachment is called friends. Well, think about it, on this planet in terms of sentient beings, there's no fourth category, you know. So these states of mind determine everything. So in our lives, objects the same. There's either an object you don't care about, there's an object you have aversion to, or there's an object you're attached to. So this sounds cute, but this is really a very stable kind of way of seeing. This is how the universe is. There's no fourth option. There's variations of attachment, variations, a spectrum of anger or aversion, and then the rest is indifference. Couldn't care. And, you know, doesn't matter whether it's sentient beings or things, because these three states of mind run are the way we are if we're samsaric sentient beings, and they're the source of suffering. Okay, so then we can say that our lives, we're driven, attachment is the drive within us, like I said, to get nice things such that when we have contact with them, and this is the point, so that pleasant feelings are triggered. That's called happiness. Then attachment's job, when it doesn't get what it wants, is to now change its job to try and get rid of the ugly thing, such that when you have contact with it, unpleasant feelings are triggered. So if you look at your life, we spend our lives trying to get the nice things and avoid the ugly things, because we want the nice feelings and we don't want the ugly feelings. Pretty straightforward. And we couldn't care about the neutral. Forget them. Don't bother with them. So this law of karma, as far as Buddha is concerned, is the law that he says that if we live according to it, according to the way he sees it, is what will stop suffering and bring happiness. Because, I mean, he says if you observe all beings, we all want to be happy, we all don't want to suffer. But basically he says this is his method for describing the causes of happiness and the causes of suffering. So this is his first teaching he gave after he, you know, did his trip. And he taught for the first time, as known as the Four Noble Truths. So basically, the truths aren't noble, it's just how they call them. It's really the four truths about life, according to the noble ones, one of these terms in Sanskrit, for somebody who's realized this, okay? So these four truths, or four facts, I like the word fact better, truth says about religion, sounds a bit like religion. The four facts, it's all in terms of suffering. The first one is there is suffering. Second, there are causes. Third, you can get rid of them, the suffering and its causes. And fourth, the methods, how to do it. It's a way of presenting, again, it's a way of framing or presenting the entirety of Buddhist practice, you know, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology as well. So then what is suffering? Well, there's three levels of it. But let's just talk about the first one, which is fairly evident to all of us. He calls it the suffering of suffering. It's like in-your-face suffering, or the suffering of pain. It's fairly evident. That's when, simply speaking, that's when the bad things happen. We know that. The moment you get a knee ache, the moment a bee bites you, you know, I've got pain now on my leg. Of course I'm blaming the bee, you know, isn't it? You've got pain and you want to be rid of it. You don't want to have pain. So that's called suffering. So we all know there's a spectrum of that. You can have the most mild pain, like a bee sting, all the way to being tortured, you know. I mean, we can see this, very clear. The suffering of suffering, you know, the suffering of pain. So it's very evident we don't want that. So obviously it seems to me, and this is what the Buddhist approach, that you know, you have to first establish a problem, you label the problem, and then in order to get rid of it, you need to, surely the crucial step, the next one, you have to establish the cause of it. But it seems to me if you can locate precisely the cause of a problem, that implies a solution. And certainly here, this is the truth. So the Buddha's view is, if we look at this first kind of suffering, and speaking very simply, we're seeing it in the bigger picture framework of past lives and future lives, but if we can look into this life and see these situations since we're born, that we would label suffering situations, triggered by the husband leaving you, the bee biting you, the person abusing you, you understand what I'm saying? But the suffering is not the external, the suffering is the experience in the mind. The experience in the mind. This is a crucial thing to say. Because we're so addicted to looking at the outside world, if I describe my happiness, I'm going to describe the event that I think triggered it. The beautiful boyfriend, the delicious cake. If I'm describing my suffering, I'm going to describe the event that triggered it. But here we're describing internal experience. Suffering is a mental experience as well as through the sensory consciousness. That's technically, literally the Buddha saying. Triggered by, yes, things happening out there. Absolutely. And that's part of the way this works. So the first level of suffering then is when the bad things happen. It's pretty evident. We get that. We agree. So then what's the cause of it? Because the Buddha says you can get rid of suffering and its causes. So what are his view of why the boyfriend is mean to me? Why I'm having such pain in my mind, which is the trigger for me having pain. So as far as I'm concerned, the cause of my suffering, as we said, is the boyfriend. That's the cause of my suffering. Why am I happy? The boyfriend. That's the cause of my happiness. That's the default view we have, which is we describe in our psychology, our philosophy, etc. So the Buddha's answer is more nuanced than that. He doesn't disagree, like I said, but for him, the boyfriend's action, whether it's kind action or unkind, that's the catalyst that triggers the internal experience of suffering or happiness. So the suffering then, as far as he's concerned, and we're just talking the first level of suffering when the bad things happen, when attachment doesn't get what it wants. This is implied by the second of these Four Noble Truths, which is there are causes of suffering. So as far as he's concerned, that indeed, like anything, there are thousands of things that have to come together to produce anything. You know, many things, just to produce a cup, you have a very long list of things that have to come together. You can locate the main cause of a cup. You can locate the main cause of a flower. Well, equally for him, you can locate many things that have to come together to produce that moment of my suffering. But he says the two main causes of that moment of Robina's suffering are two. One is past action, the meaning of the word karma, and let's just be simple, let's say I get punched in the nose. Speaking very simplistically, the first cause of my being punched in the nose by someone else is an action like that, speaking simplistically, that was number one, action, karma, and number two, the main cause of it is the delusion or the neurotic state of mind that impelled me to do that punch in the nose or to do that harm. Speaking simply, what is the cause of my happiness? Someone is generous and gives me money for my taxi because I can't find my wallet. That's a moment of generosity which triggers a happy feeling. So what's the main cause of that happiness of mine? One, a past action of something like that, generosity. Two, based upon a virtuous state of mind, a genuine wish to be of help to somebody. So karma and delusions are the two that are the source of, the main causes of suffering, and karma and virtue are the two main causes of happiness. So Buddha points these out because he says by working on these, you get to the root of the problem. You can't necessarily solve the problem of being punched now, it's already happened, but you can learn from that and not do it again, and not cause it again. So the Buddha's basically saying every millisecond of what any sentient being experiences in their mind, what they experience in terms of what happens to them, even the way the environment impacts upon us, even the very humanity of this life itself, the main causes of these are our past actions. So in this kind of, you know, as the Dalai Lama said one time, the law of karma is like self-creation. So here we're taking the view, right, which take this as our hypothesis, that my consciousness is beginningless. My consciousness will continue after I die. Every millisecond of what I'm experiencing now. Okay, there's 4 ways in which my past actions can ripen in the present, and 4 ways that my present actions will and can ripen in the future, in general. Every millisecond, and this is all sentient beings. So the first way our karma has ripened from the past is the fact that we've got a human body. In our case. So the cause of anything that you label, so the Buddha would suggest that it's better to get a human life than a lion's life. Not criticizing lions, but humans have a bit more access to virtue and intelligence if we're fortunate. I mean, look at the human planet. You wouldn't think so. So if we can access our virtue, can access our intelligence, that's our saving grace. That can help us get the hell out of this mess, you know. So the Buddha would suggest a human life, getting a human life is like winning the lottery. It's like phenomenal. So the way this happens very roughly is, let's say, not more than a few weeks before present conception in our mummy's womb, because the mind comes into the womb at the time of conception, okay? So not more than a few weeks before that, we can deduce that my mind was in a previous body, and at the time of my death, and this is described in great detail in all the texts, at the time of my past death, one of my a virtuous karmic seed, in particular from conscious, intentional, non-harming, non-killing, because everything we ever do, think and say doesn't go astray. Every millisecond that we think and do and say sows seeds in my mind. Every millisecond that we think and do and say drops seeds into our bank vaults. We've got 4 bank vaults. This is my own analogy, okay? So at the end of my death, one of my virtuous karmic seeds was triggered, which is already was programming me to go to this present mother's human womb several weeks later when she hopped into bed with my daddy, roughly speaking. Second, at the same time, my second bank vault, all the karmic seeds that are my habits that will provide Robina with her personality traits. It's very clear for the Buddha that love and compassion and kindness and psychosis and being good at music or football do not come from your parents. This is one massive point. They're my habits from my past practice of them. And they are triggered. The personality traits that'll become the personality of the person called Robina in this body are triggered at the same time. The third little bank vault of seeds that are triggered will produce what is called experiences, similar to the cause. So that means in this life, for example, we can see we are very social beings, aren't we? Since we're conceived, we've relied upon humans. Mummy had got a womb, daddy had to give the sperm, then you pop out of the mummy's womb, you have friends and people, and then in your house you have rats and cockroaches and pets and next door neighbours, and then in your life you meet people who are kind to you, in your life you meet people who are mean to you, and if you think about it up to now, that's it. Forget the ones who do neither, they're called strangers. But we've got people who have been mean to us, and people who have been kind to us to whatever degree, since we are conceived, since we're born, think about it. Well, every one of those experiences, because karma is a natural law, remember, is the result of actions like that we've done to those people, because karma is pretty personal. I mean, this is hilarious to us. It seems pretty cosmic. But this is a natural law. If it's a natural law and no one's running it, then it's consistent and coherent every time. So whoever we meet, however they see us, however they treat us, whether it's the rat or your boyfriend, whether it's the rapist or the beloved, the way they see you, how they treat you, is the fruit of actions of yours like that. Like that. Literally, every one, every second. There's nothing random about this. It can't be random. It's a natural law. The fourth way our karma ripens is even the very physical world, the way it impacts upon us. The physical elements. This is not evident immediately, but I can describe it if we have time, but maybe not, you know, whatever. So there's 4 ways that our karma, and we're living this out every second, 4 ways from our past actions, and just some of them, because we've got countless past lives, and we're carrying those seeds with us, and at certain times we'll meet the right conditions, and those seeds will ripen as happiness, or those seeds will ripen as suffering. But basically, suffering and happiness sound cute, but it's a way of describing your entire life, you know. So, every minute of your life up until now, first your humanity itself, how come you went to that mother's womb? Because when you die, the mind then, when they hop into bed, you run like a magnet into that egg and sperm at the time of conception. So you create the cause to get that mother and that father, and it's not a random event. You've got powerful karmic history with each other. The Buddhas, you would say that. We've all met each other countless times before. It is not a random event. You run to people you've got karma with, either the ones who are mean to you or the ones who are kind to you. The strangers we ignore. Next life, maybe they're friend or enemy. So our own humanity, the fruit of our past virtue. Second, all our tendencies. So if you're good at music, you can deduce you've got some tendency like that. Look at these little girls, you go on YouTube, they're playing Bach at the age of 3. You can't believe it, you know. I remember one little 7-year-old American was writing pieces for 62-piece orchestras. You go, oh, well, they're just unusual. Well, you know, it's not enough. It's not an explanation, is it? Their mother's not a musician. Can't find it in their genes. I mean, the Buddha's view is they've got this tendency. So whether you kill in this life, whether you wake up wanting to kill or lie or steal or play music or football or be kind, they're all just tendencies in your mind and they're your own past habits. That you track them back to your habits. They're super personal, super personal. In fact, the idea for the Buddha, either that a creator can make you, or that your mother and father can make you, are kind of weird. That's just my way of saying it. Your mind is totally yours. What's in it is everything you put into it. It's not possible, the Buddha's view would be, it's not possible that someone can inject anger into you. It's impossible. They can punch you, yeah. If you get angry, that's because you've got the tendency to be angry. And we, like I said, we come programmed at the first second of conception, and these seeds were already triggered before we even stopped breathing in the past life. This is all dealt with an immense depth in all the literature. I'm just making it very simple. This is the way, this is the view that's been in Asia for several thousand years. It's just that in our European culture, we know zero about it because we don't study Indian philosophy, you know. This is certainly the Buddhist one. So again, our own humanity is the fruit of past virtue. Getting a human body as opposed to a lion's body. Second, your tendencies. And now whether your mother Hitler or Teresa, we can see, just because you've got a human life, doesn't mean you're going to be a nice person. So you've got your tendencies, which are from another bunch of other karmic seeds. The third lot is your experiences at the hands of others, from the second of conception up to now, without exception. However you're seen and treated by others is an experience similar to the cause. What cause? Actions like that done by you, and karma's personal. And the fourth one is called environmental karma. Like I said, the very way the physical world impacts upon you. This is a natural law for the Buddha. He didn't make it up, he has observed it. Obviously, we have to assert here a subtler level of cognition. Otherwise, this is plain nonsense. You can't see these things. It's clearly made, and that's why we think it's made up. You know? It's the experience of the beings who've done this work, is how they're saying it. And of course, I don't believe them, but this is the hypothesis. And as anybody who's interested in being a Buddhist, that's what you're doing. You study this stuff and look into it, and gradually, as you progress, you experience this for yourself. Or you prove Buddha's wrong, in which case, thanks Buddha, bye. It's up to us, you know. So I'll give one example. The fruit, the four results of, let's say, an action of non-killing, conscious, intentional non-killing. The four results would be: one, these seeds stay in your mind and they grow, seeds multiply and they bring many fruits. Nothing goes astray. So the fruit of that would be get a human body. For example, second, the result of non-killing would ripen as a tendency to not kill. Well, when we look at this human planet, it's the opposite. Most humans kill something, you know. I was taught as a Catholic that God made creatures for our benefit. It's okay to kill them. That's not the Buddha view. Three, the karmic result as an experience of past non-killing is you don't die young and you don't get killed. Again, look at the human planet, just the humans alone. People get killed all the time, people die young, people die as fetuses. I mean, somebody won the lottery and got a human womb and then died before they're even born. And the fourth way that non-killing would ripen is you be fat and healthy and whatever you eat will nourish you. Look, and just do the reverse, you know. We wake up in this life with tendencies to kill. We wake up in this life with people who have the karma to get killed or die young, and people wake up in this life with ill health, get sick, polluted water, polluted air, polluted food. People die from peanuts, you know. Even one kid I just read about in the New York Times, he just got cheese, some cheese flavour was sort of thrown onto him by accident. He died, you know. It's called environmental karma. The way the very physical world impacts upon us is the fruit of actions that we have done. So in this sense, in a literal sense, but not like kind of magic wand, but we are the creators of our reality. There's no concept in Buddhism of a creator making us, doing it, or no concept of mummy and daddy making us. But of course, it's the obvious physical one. They give us genes, they give us a brain, they treat us a certain way. But the main cause of even getting that womb, getting those genes, is my past actions. That's the view of karma, in essence. So taking from a bigger picture point of view, then you, as a Buddhist, you'd factor that in as a way, and this is where radical change can come into your life. Because, you know, if you're born, like if we're like materialists, philosophical materialists, we have the view that we don't question, that we do believe is true, that Mummy and Daddy created me. That means I didn't ask to get born. I agree with you. You didn't. And so then my Mummy and Daddy make me, and they give me depression, and give me anger, and give me jealousy, and they treat me badly, or indeed treat me nicely, and that is what caused me. Like I said, for the Buddha, that's merely conditions, and that's experiences similar to the cause, the third way, your karma, right? But you come into that womb, into that fallopian tube, and your consciousness, your very subtle consciousness, conjoins that egg and sperm, already fully programmed with your tendencies, your experiences at the hands of others, and even the way the environment impacts upon you. So we are like literally the creators of our own past lives, from our own past lives of our present, and every millisecond we are creating our future. That's the Buddha's view. Very briefly. So that's, I mean, I know for me when I first heard the Buddhist teachings, I found this view of karma, I didn't understand it at the beginning, but I found that was something that was missing in my life. I found it very powerful, you know. And when I was a Catholic, I was very devoted, I loved God. But I never thought of God as my creator. It was very interesting. I didn't think that view. But the Buddha's view is, so the Buddha's view is that we're the ones who come programmed in this life with all our own tendencies, all the happiness and all the suffering. But what's fascinating, and this is the irony of ego, when we hear this, the first thing we're hearing is, oh, you mean I'm the blame? Oh, you mean I've done bad things? Oh, you mean that little girl deserves to be raped? Oh, you mean that poor innocent animal deserves to be harmed? No, that's how we think. Because why? Because we assume we're all born as innocent victims. We assume we didn't ask to get born. And we also have an assumption, which I think is very interesting, and this is the assumption of attachment and aversion. The assumption of attachment is very fascinating. That's why Buddha says we have to unpack it and really question it. It's a huge, arrogant assumption that somehow I only deserve good and I don't deserve bad. So that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, especially if you think that your mother and father made you, because they decided to create you and they plonk you on this earth. So then, of course, if you think you didn't ask to get born, I agree with you. I agree. You do, you know, how dare these people make you and then suffering happens. I mean, that's very wicked, you know. It's quite shocking. But this attachment is this kind of intense assumption that somehow I deserve good things and that somehow I don't deserve bad. It's very fascinating. Maybe we should say we want good things and we don't want bad things. But the interesting aspect of ego is it's a sense of deserve. But where does that come from? You've got to analyse that assumption. I mean, you've really got to analyse that assumption. I mean, if you have a garden and it's your garden, you don't say, who put weeds in my garden? You know it's your garden, and if there are weeds in it, you must have put them there, or you must have not pulled them out. You don't look in your bank account. How dare there be no, what's your money again? What's it called?
Lay.
What?
Lay.
How dare there be no lay in my bank account? Nobody would say that. You'd be laughed at. Look at the assumption. The assumption when you say that is that someone else is responsible to put money in your bank. No, they're not. It's your bank account. So that's why we blame. Someone out there did it to me, you know. How dare I don't have money? How dare I have weeds? That's meaningless. Well, the Buddha says the same with this. You don't say, how dare a person harm me? Or what are you doing good things to me? You know? They're the fruit of actions. Because this life, that's why the analogy of gardens is quite good. This life is our garden, you know. And whatever's in it, baby, you did it. You put it. It's kind of powerful. People don't like it. That's okay. For whatever reason, I found the view of karma fantastic. I really like the idea of being in charge. Maybe that's why I like it. That I created the cause of my own reality, my own experience, which means I can grow my future garden. Not have to rely on someone else. Are we communicating here? Any questions from this? I mean, there's been massive questions, but are there any questions before we go further? This is a fundamental part of the Buddhist practice, you know. Not everybody likes it, not everybody thinks about it even. You go to a Japanese Zen center, you won't ever hear this. They don't talk much about the philosophy, you know. So the real point here is the experiential implication of it, which is what I'm saying. But right now, this is what Buddha's saying, this ego grasping, this mistaken sense of self, and I want to talk more about this maybe tomorrow, is what is underpinning all the other nonsense. And there's this massive sense of a ridiculous sense of a separate, innocent victim me. It's just meaningless for the Buddha. It's a meaningless concept we've made up. So naturally we get furious when bad things happen, and we get greedy when good